There's a massive shift happening within OpenAI and the ChatGPT landscape with the launch of ChatGPT apps. Now, that announcement was made late last year, I think it was October, and then the App Store launched in December. But Trade Me Property has been the first New Zealand company or entity to basically launch itself as a ChatGPT app, which is pretty damn exciting for New Zealand. Hats off to them. It's unproven. No one really knows what's going to happen with this potential distribution shift, but they're making the plunge. They're going to see what they learn from it. There's probably a ton of opportunity. But effectively, this is a big shift that we're going to see with how we interface with the web. Most of us are used to going to a website, and now we've increasingly started to use the likes of ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, whatever it is, to find our information. And so that in-chat experience is becoming even more important because that's where all of our behavior is headed for research, work, shopping, all the rest of it. And so with the launch of the App Store, OpenAI is giving businesses the opportunity to build and curate a real experience inside their App Store. So this is really around the interface moving from being a standalone app or a website into this singular sort of chat interface, which OpenAI is looking to own more and more. Now, we saw the launch of a number of apps back in October as part of OpenAI's launch of the ChatGPT apps concept. So Spotify from memory, Booking.com, maybe Expedia, I think Figma, Canva might have been right up there as well. They were some of the first ones to launch as part of that space. But I think what's really interesting to think about is we lived through the early smartphone era back in 2007, which is when the browser felt like the universal kind of interface and apps felt very, very niche. Then Apple really normalized the App Store and Android followed pretty quick, and the center of gravity moved on mobiles from website to using apps. This feels like that distribution shift again, with conversations with your application or a database all living within AI interfaces like ChatGPT, but not as websites, not as mobile apps. These are LLM native experiences that show up inside a conversation. So let's have a look at how the Trade Me Property app actually works. To access it, I hit the plus button, I go down to more, and then I can access the different apps I've connected with. I've connected the application, I should say, not with my account necessarily. And now I can have a conversation with it to bring in properties into my chat interface. So I'm going to create a situation. Find for me a house in Auckland that is below $1 million. I've got 2 kids, I've got a backyard, and I really want a garage. I ideally want to be near a park. So let's just see what we get back from ChatGPT and the Trade Me app. So what's happening now is basically ChatGPT or OpenAI is calling the ChatGPT app. Of course, there's a layer of reasoning that's happening in here. You can see that on screen. It's interpreting what I've queried and starting to talk to the application. It will start to pull in a map and some property listings relevant to my criteria. Now, I think what's really important to call out is that every time we have a distribution shift like this, we didn't experience Uber or Airbnb from day one when mobile became proliferated and became a big deal in our lives. The same way that when the internet was launched, websites were basically digital brochures. When the App Store was launched, we saw the same thing. We saw websites transposed into applications, but that experience looked very similar. My gut feel is that what we'll see with a lot of these apps that are coming out on OpenAI's platform is they will look like today's apps or websites, but basically transposed into the same in-chat experience. We won't be able to conceive of the different business models and native experiences within chat that businesses will build over time to be far more forward-thinking, to take advantage of the fact that chat has a lot of context and it has a lot of knowledge about me. It can start to really tailor and customize the conversation I'm having with it and the context it serves up. So what we have on screen here is we've got the Trade Me Property Listing app. For those who aren't watching, I've just expanded the map and you can see all the listings around the Upper North Island in Auckland. They're pinned on the map. I've got this card system, so I can see some properties in Wellsford or Pukekohe, Randwick Park, Takanini. And as I'm scrolling across the property listings, the map is illuminating the marker on that map and basically showing me where it is. Now, if I click out of that map and see how ChatGPT has interpreted what I'd asked, I asked for a property under $1 million. I'm looking for a garage, backyard, near a park or reserve. The map is now showing 150 of 1,400 total matches. So it's pulled some of the most family plus garage looking options. So the keyword matches are coming from the listing text, which is really interesting. So what that really means for brands and businesses is that today's property listings, and this applies to every business and every product or service that we're advertising on our websites today, those listings or those catalogs we have are built for humans. We're trying to persuade humans to buy through emotion and to get them, to convince them in a time to purchase our product or to start to compare and research deeper into whatever we're offering on our website. Now, the difference with agents is that they don't need to be persuaded necessarily. They rely on logic. They rely on machine-readable information and data. So that fundamentally means that property listings that we write today will need to look very different in the future if you want to be showing up within AI interfaces, within a relevant contextual situation or conversation for what the user is inquiring about. So if you can think about a Trade Me listing today, it's going to say harbour view and great space for development, and you can raise the kids in the backyard and all that great stuff. That doesn't quite tell me all of the information I need to know about the property. That's scratching the surface. You think about the context that chat might have about my life. It might know that I've got a knee problem and I can't walk upstairs. Now, it's not as if the listing is going to necessarily on Trade Me today, there are 15 stairs to walk up to get to the house and 20 stairs internal to access different parts of the property, etc. But if ChatGPT knows I've got a knee injury, it's probably going to infer that I probably don't want to live somewhere and make a big investment for the next 10, 15, 20 years to have to walk upstairs with a buggered knee. So with that rich context, provided the listing has that information, giving me information about every aspect of the property, and I would say the more enriched a property listing is, or a product listing or services listing moving forward within that's being exposed to these interfaces, the more tailored and personalized the experience can be for the user, which means that any business who is selling something on the other end of this interaction or experience has a better chance of converting that buyer or appealing to their needs. Mike might have PTSD because he purchased a monoclad house back in the day, so it knows, based on all my counseling that I've needed through ChatGPT, to always avoid showing me property listings that are monoclad builds, for example. Or if you've had an apartment and you have hated paying body court fees, it'll start to avoid showing you apartments without you having to say, I don't want an apartment, or I don't want a monoclad, or I don't want stairs. It'll know this stuff about you and it can start to tailor that experience. So that's going to be really critical moving forward, and that's important for not only how you build your application and product data to show up within that application, but for generative engine optimization and answer engine optimization, those evolutions of what SEO is. How do we show up as a brand or a product within an AI summary or a recommendation from AI above our competitors is critical. So enriching that product data feed and catalog and exposing that information into the AI interface through ChatGPT is critical. So back to the experience I'm being shown by ChatGPT, it's then given me a short list underneath the map and the explanation of the different listings. Now I still have to click off or click through to Trade Me to view these properties. It's not giving me everything. It's telling me the address and some high-level information, how the property is being sold. And then it's even been smart enough to go, if you're okay to go a bit further out, here's something with more land, bigger yard, here are a couple of properties. It's then even given me a recommendation to tighten up my request here. So let's just see if I can start to play with it a bit. I also want to buy some sheep and begin Airbnb property that I will build on the land. I'm making this up as I go. I've got no idea what it's going to say. But I think that the key thing here is that I've talked about the experience that ChatGPT is delivering thanks to Trade Me Property, all very different compared to which app you're working with. But the key is that Trade Me are now in the arena. They're going to be getting a ton of data. They're building exposure to their customer base through ChatGPT. They've probably got a relationship with OpenAI and getting access to the latest and greatest resources or guidance on how to build these experiences. So they're going to constantly optimize this experience to go and deliver an in-native experience, which today this is sufficient. I've got a map, I can see the properties, it's giving me an experience, even as I've provided additional information on what I want around maybe Airbnb or want some sheep. it knows then that I need a bigger piece of land, and it's given me a bunch of property options further outside of Auckland, bigger sections with a few thousand meters of land. So yeah, it's obviously interpreting what I need, and it's making some strong recommendations. And this is that concept of agentic commerce or conversational commerce, where I'm having a conversation, it's tailoring the experience for me, and then the agentic commerce piece is ensuring that it brings in the right data and serves up those experiences for me in real time with the context that it has on me and what I'm after. That's interesting. It's gone a reality check on the sheep in the Airbnb plan. Sheep need real land, so you want lifestyle zoning, so it knows some elements of what I might need that's smart. It says a second dwelling is not a given. You need to check Auckland Council rules for exact zone servicing. So it's giving me some advice, again, helping me make a really informed decision. Of course, I wouldn't just trust ChatGPT. I'd go and do more due diligence, but it's a good start. And yeah, it's updated the filters clearly. It's given me 20 matches. It's now filtered by lifestyle sections, over 5,000 square meters, under $1 million. Yeah, so it's good. It's a good start, I would say. But I think the difference in what we'll see with a lot of these ChatGPT apps is that this is not just about a chatbot talking to us, but it's also about what an app now can do for us, or what we can delegate to the app. Because people are going to be landing on your website less and less. They're going to be in mid-conversation. For example, I selected Trade Me Property. If we start a fresh conversation right now and I start talking about property buying, in theory, Trade Me Property should actually be exposed or invoke itself without me having to basically select the app and say, let's call the app, so let's give it a test. I want to buy a property in Wellington. No. Let's go with something a bit more ambiguous. I'm sick of the city life and I want to go live in the country, but I'm not sure what I can afford and where I should go and live, or what properties are available. I'm curious. It's either going to come back with some counselling, or it's going to basically pull and Trade Me Property listings. But anyway, I'm talking to it in plain English. It's going to interpret. It's going to hopefully grab some listings. Okay, it's bringing me planning property advice, so it's probably not smart enough yet. Find me properties in Wellington for a rental. Yeah, I'm not too worried about. Find me properties in Wellington for a rental that costs under 600k. So instead of selecting the Trade Me Property app, I've just said find me some properties in Wellington for a rental that costs under 600k. Let's see if it comes back. This whole concept basically flips. We've now got to manage a website. We've now got to manage a ChatGPT app. If we go down this path, it flips everything we know about design and distribution, because as a business, you're now losing control of how you engage with a customer. ChatGPT is the one, or OpenAI are the ones who are determining what gets surfaced mid-conversation. Of course, if I'm connecting in my app in particular, then that's a different equation. I want to have a curated experience from Trade Me, or from my CRM, or from booking.com, whatever it is. I'm choosing in that moment, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for businesses when someone is in that full discovery mode without even knowing who they want to go to, whether that be a provider of a service or a product or an aggregator of that information. But it's a big shift that a lot of companies are going to have to think about. Should you follow the path, basically, and build a ChatGPT app? Because ultimately, this is the new UI that people need to be thinking about, and this is where a lot of our lives are going to be discussed and housed within these environments. So this app, or ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever it might be, is going to be the place that's going to start to know you the most, and you'll rely on it more and more to make decisions, validate your thoughts, etc. The scary part is how much they're going to start to know about us, and then, of course, access to data and security. If now I'm logged into Trade Me and ChatGPT or OpenAI is now passing that data from Trade Me through to my context window, what are they going to do with that data? What's the data retention policy? How is that data going to be weaponized or monetized? I should say weaponized against me. Because if it now knows that I'm looking to buy a property, am I now going to get targeted with ChatGPT's incoming ads from, I don't know, a buyer's agent? And what if I'm just not interested in that type of service, but I'm bombarded? Of course, if I'm a paid ChatGPT user, I would expect to be exempt from ads. I'm paying for privacy and to not be harassed. If you're a free ChatGPT user, then you might not be so lucky. I'm pretty sure, if not, it's been confirmed that those who aren't paying are going to be susceptible to seeing ads, and that's, you pay with your attention at the end of the day. But yeah, the example on screen that I tried, it didn't go and find me properties for Wellington under 600k. The Trade Me property listing app didn't turn up, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm sure, that'll become more second nature and appear pretty quickly. So I suppose for any business that's thinking about what should I start to do if I am considering a ChatGPT app, and I post something on this yesterday, this is for any sort of major business who has the CapEx investment and they want to be front of mind for businesses. And of course, it's a good puff piece here. You can be one of the first to market with a ChatGPT app, which will create some press and some interest for your brand. But again, this is where behavior is shifting. People are starting to use these tools and platforms for everything. And that's being seen in the numbers of the erosion of Google's traffic and the increasing traffic to ChatGPT, but as well as Gemini as well, despite market share of those platforms shifting. But of course, if that's where attention is going to be, then people need to be thinking more and more, how do I ensure I'm relevant within those environments? So I think key to think about is that you're losing control in terms of the customer coming to your website. You now need to be available and accessible and readable by agents to make sure that your experience is curated by these AI platforms and shows up mid-conversation at the right place, right time, with the right offer and all that stuff to the user. And you might only have that one shot to nail your pitch or how you're included or how you show up within that user's experience. And unfortunately, that's the invisible marketplace in terms of OpenAI is the gatekeeper to that experience, as is Google, as is Anthropic, as is other insert model, where user asks or submits a prompt. The model behind the scenes is basically then going out and surveying websites and other applications and so forth, and the apps that it has access to, and it is able to then pull information and surface that information in the best way it pleases. If you are not able to be surfaced or found by those agents, you will not be surfaced basically into the conversation with the user. And it'd be interesting to see, how does ChatGPT start to promote more of the applications for those who have built an app versus, say, pulling information from a website that has exposed its APIs or product data. It'll be interesting to see how favoritism plays out there, and of course advertising as well. But really that the context is the big shift that people need to be thinking about. So when the business doesn't own that screen, that context becomes a competitive advantage because AI knows so much about us. Again, our budget, our location preference, our family size, or commute tolerance is another good one. And so the property listing in the Trade Me example, the one that wins isn't the one with the premium placement necessarily. Of course, advertising, if that shifts in that direction, could be an advantage. But it's going to be the one that really matches what I'm looking for and personalizes that experience, which comes down to that property listing providing far more information, appealing to an agent than we're used to today when we write property listings or product descriptions or service outlines of what we offer. The second shift for New Zealand businesses, and again, that structured data, that really becomes the moat. The AI can only represent a business as well as the data it has access to effectively. So again, rich descriptions, accurate metadata, verified information, that's always going to beat a featured listing every time. And even if you think about your systems like inventory management systems or ERPs and maybe even CRMs to an extent, there is live data in there. And as a business, you need to expose that live data to these AI platforms so that the AI knows what you have in stock, what's available, how accurate is the information. And so there's a whole kind of new way of thinking about your infrastructure and architecture as a business to prepare for, to make sure information shows up in the right experience within ChatGPT, whether you're building an application for ChatGPT or not, whether you just want to be found in there. And again, the other shift that we'll talk about is the design question really flips. It's not about where should the user go on my website, where do we take them next on that customer journey, but what can my business help the user accomplish right now in someone else's environment. And now what we're talking about is ChatGPT apps within ChatGPT, but I don't see there being any particular restrictions around if I build an app on OpenAI's platform, why can't that app go and live on my own website, maybe in social media one day, maybe on a retail media type, like other channels that are out there? Why would those applications not show up in other areas? They're just code. They don't need to be serviced only within ChatGPT. So thinking through the continuous fragmentation of those experiences is going to be it's going to be a massive shift for a lot of marketers and tech teams as they think about where's attention going and how do we build for that fragmentation in the journey. Now again, I'm not proposing that everyone goes out and builds a GPT app. It needs to suit your experience that you're offering, and arguably at the moment, is anyone looking for your product or brand necessarily in AI tools? Maybe not. There's some considerations around that. But I think the advice I would give is not to follow a lot of the quick win type examples that I've seen online. There are people saying you can build a ChatGPT app in less than 5 minutes, paste your website, AI pulls your business info, add your products and services, submit to ChatGPT's app store, no code or no developers. Like that, there's no point putting up a crap experience. You're only going to dissuade prospects and buyers from coming back and looking for your brand. And of course, as I say, there'll be a lot of people who will build apps the same way they built websites in the early days of the internet, with low effort and trying to land grab or cash grab. Just don't provide the terrible experience. You don't want to degrade your brand at the expense of trying to be the first. And I think OpenAI gave some great guidance on that UX rules, which is basically they own the gateway. They are the power player in this relationship with basically anyone at the moment. So their guidance is to avoid feature stuffing. You've got to remember that users won't be opening your app or starting on your homepage. They're basically being exposed to your brand mid-conversation at a point in time, whether they've chosen to because they've connected with your app, or somehow if it gets exposed organically, if that's part of the experience moving forward. But I can imagine the best apps will look surprisingly small from the outside, and they won't recreate the entire product as you might know it today in your website or your application. They will offer fewer sort of specific powers, and we saw that with the property listing app from TradeMe. Going back to the example here, what did they give me? They gave me basically the map and the listings, and of course this will evolve and I'll be able to do more, maybe bidding from within, and I don't know, putting listings up myself, filtering listings in and out. There's a whole bunch of customization that'll come, and I'm sure when I connect in my TradeMe account it'll be an even better experience. But I think it comes down to, for any business, like what is that unit of value that you're trying to deliver as part of the overall experience, and specifically what is the specific thing that you want the user to be able to accomplish at that very moment in time for a specific prompt. And you can't cater to all prompts or all situations, but if you think about the common user journeys that someone might experience when your app is invoked within ChatGPT, how can you design for the top one initially and make that a humming experience? But then how do you design for the top 3 experiences? Perhaps they're going to look quite different. Like right now I'm a buyer looking at properties to buy in TradeMe Property, but of course TradeMe Property is excellent for rentals. Let's see, find me a 600 a week rental property in Auckland. Can it find rentals? But what about real estate agents? How do I go and list my property through this medium? Because within ChatGPT I might have my images coming through via an MCP folder within Google Drive or within SharePoint perhaps, and then I want some council information coming through from a portal that I have access to or something else. Like all these data sources that I usually have to access the applications individually or the websites, I can now pull that information organically, or automatically I should say, into this window, and then have TradeMe create the listing automatically. Spoiler for people who aren't watching, unfortunately I can't find rental properties through the TradeMe property listing tool, but again, I'm sure that'll come in good time. So I think to end it, ChatGPT apps represent what I would say to be a pretty rare distribution opportunity, because when mobile and the cloud really took off and we got used to social media apps on our phone and Uber and Airbnb and all that good stuff, all those marketplaces, mobile distribution and penetration was still growing exponentially, and the internet was fast, but it wasn't as fast as it is today. Cloud wasn't as good as it is today. The user experience wasn't as mature as it is today. But today we're starting in a field where the internet is fairly ubiquitous across a large part of the world. There's still places that still need to get better access. We all use mobile phones. We all use ChatGPT, 1 billion people globally, but that's still a fair number. So you're basically starting from a position where there is already attention. The capabilities are there. We're all fairly aware of what a good experience looks like, so we can cut through the crap experiences pretty easy compared to what we first saw when mobile apps came out. So when this new channel really starts to open up, like I think it will, early movers will be able to capture habits that are really hard to break. And we saw that in the early days with some of the apps. For enterprises, ChatGPT apps are basically a new channel alongside their existing apps or their websites. And same again for entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. This is a chance to really build a micro app and get distribution without a major marketing budget, because no one knows what they're doing yet. Everyone's going to be figuring this out on the fly. There's no right or wrong. But I think those with a good sense of what their audience needs, what audience behavior might look like for their niche, and having existing data on your customers' behavior for an existing business is gold, because you know how people are going to be searching for your business to find you and what they'll do when they do engage with your brand. Of course, that whole paradigm is shifting dramatically, but you've got a head start over everyone else. The key is that the barrier to entry is low. If it only takes a few weeks to build a simple app and you've got a massive amount of reach, then there's a huge opportunity. And we haven't even started talking about monetization on the app side. Of course, OpenAI will monetize. They'll extract value. That's what happens with all distribution platform shifts, I should say. But there's obvious opportunities around revenue sharing and affiliate commissions and premium placement, paid integrations. I'm sure we'll see a bit of a mix of those. First adoption has to happen first, and then we can get into value extraction. Google and Apple did the same thing with their platforms, and then they really added that kind of intelligence later. Whereas OpenAI is really starting with intelligence and adding the platform today. So they've almost flipped that model in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, Trade Me is the first live example in New Zealand, which is pretty exciting. The question for everyone else is probably quite uncomfortable. If I'm realestate.co.nz or another property listing site, I'm going, what am I going to do? Should I try and compete? Or when is the experience for our website? When is it moving outside of the platform? When it does move to ChatGPT or off our website or our app, what does that mean? How do we start to compete? So really the key is thinking about context, structured data, being useful mid-conversation, thinking about the design and the UX, and really about just shipping. Get something out there that looks decent, learn quickly, and then build and iterate. That's the beauty of these tools these days, is you don't need massive budgets anymore to build an application and be present where the attention is and where it's moving to increasingly.